Um, Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second all candidates meeting hosted through oh, one moment. Um, oh, Lisa, our moderator, is asking if John and Ian could respond to her messages in chat.
Oh, in chat.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, sorry for the interruption, everyone. But again, welcome to the second all candidates meeting hosted through a collaboration of CLAP and Trinity Western University's Environmental Club. Before I go any further, I want to acknowledge that though this meeting is taking place online, it takes place on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, including the Stolo, Kwantlen, and Tawasin First Nations, and that environmental issues, no matter how big or small they are intrinsically linked to the rights and the sovereignty of Indigenous people. I'm your host tonight, Laura, and I'm joined by my wonderful panelists, Natalie Ross, Eli Hacker, and Lauren Mckenna, as well as our candidates, Mr. John Aldag of the Liberal Party of Canada, Mr. Ian Kenny of the People's Party of Canada, and Mr. Rajesh Jayaprakash from the NDP. Before I go any further, my father and president of CLAP, Lionel Pandolfo, would like to give an introductory speech before we begin. So one moment.
Greetings, everyone. I am Dr. Lionel Pandolfo. I'm the host of today's our candidate meeting. I'm the father of the host of today's candidate meeting, and of course, I am not here simply because I'm the father of Laura, but because I am a climate scientist. I used to be a climate researcher with NASA at the Goddard Institute for Space Studies in New York City. So I know the problems associated with climate and what we need to do in the near future about this. So I would like to start to set the stage for the fact that we talk about climate because we think it's a very important issue. Um, Actually, climate change is, or climate warming is the defining issue of our times. Um, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which represents a grouping of hundreds of scientists who actually have been publishing a report on the state of Earth's climate for the last 30 years. Well, they published their latest report, the first part of it, earlier this year, and their verdict about climate change is unequivocal this time. There's no doubt that climate change is caused by human activities. And so that's that. Additionally, uh, with respect to what kind of actions we need to do to try to counteract these effects, a paper has been published last week in the prestigious scientific journal Nature. And this paper, the authors try to determine what kind of actions we need or countries need to take to mitigate climate change. Actually, they want to not exceed 1.5 degrees for the temperature increase by 2050. So in order to keep temperatures increasing beyond 1.5 degrees by 2050, they look at what can be done with the fossil fuel reserves that are in the world. And for that, um, they look at the different countries or regions in the world that actually contain the largest amount of fossil fuel reserves. And one of them, of course, is Canada, because we have incredible amount of reserves, fossil fuel oil reserves in the tar sands, natural gas, coal. And the conclusion is that to help keep the temperature from increasing 1.5 degrees, more than 1.5 degrees by 2050, Canada has to keep 83% of its fossil fuel reserves in the ground, unextracted. So that means for the next 29 years, we should not extract more than 7% of our reserves to help the world stop or mitigate climate change. Now, this is these two statements are essentially the background that we have to consider when we go to the ballot box and actually decide which party we want to represent us in government. And this is difficult because, as most people know, many politicians, most political parties like to make announcement promises before elections. And um, the most difficult thing, well, it's not difficult for most people because the electorate wants to politicians to deal with immediate problems, essentially short-term problems. So this year's like housing affordability, childcare, firearms control. So they would like politicians, and politicians want to probably enact some laws, legislations, rules, maybe put some money in it to try to minimize or solve these problems. And so that would make the electorate happy and would hopefully re-elect them. However, the problems that are brought on by climate warming are long-term issues, and that is difficult for climate science for politicians to deal with because the the it requires a lot of money to be put into to the issue, and it's not something that politicians deal very well with. Uh, with respect to that, scientists have tried to help. Many climate scientists have moved into the social sphere lately, and they try to exhort the citizens and the governments of the world to take action to mitigate the climate warming, the global warming. Now, the problem is that this problem of climate warming creeps up on us, and it's very slow changing, but its impact on society could be terrible. For instance, we saw, and of course, that's an example of what's going to happen in the future. We saw this summer this extreme heat event, extreme heat wave that happened over the Pacific Northwest, and that was an eye opener for a lot of people. And we know that a lot of people have died in BC because of that. So this is something that we need to worry about because it will come more often in the future. And scientists have dealt with attribution studies to see if this thing was just weather or climate related. And apparently it is. It would have been very improbable that this extreme heat would have happened uh, without climate warming happening. So essentially, this is why we have these all candidate meeting question and answer questions and answer sessions, because we want to see what the various political parties plan to do on these long-term issues. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you, Papa. Next up, we will have each of the candidates give an introduction of themselves and their party, and we will start with the NDP.
Right. Thank you for CLAP for hosting this event and inviting me. Hope you can hear me. First of all, I acknowledge that I am working from the unceded territories of Semiahmoo, Katzie, Kwantlen, Coquitlam, and Kokat First Nations. Climate change is priority number one for me. I have said that in every interview I had. You can see those interviews on my Facebook page. Each and every one of them, I said that. I'm an engineer. I am a small business owner living in Cloverdale. I ran for mayor of Surrey in 2018, and green was an important component in that. I proposed a green canopy neutral development in Surrey in 2018. Using some, I won't go to the detail, but it was a key component of my platform in 2018. Now, I want to start by touching upon a recent ad in Cloverdale Reporter. You should take, the Cloverdale Reporter yesterday, and the front page, there is the advertisement. And, there's a second page also. So this one shows a lot of promises, a lot of endorsement, but this is by a party that has been in power for 6 years. And like Laura's dad just said, there is not a single line about the results so far for 6 years. I think that one thing alone will speak volume. Which party you can trust about climate change. And there is an ad for Tamara also. They haven't mentioned anything either. Now, from NDP, we will cut emissions by more than half by 2030. We will eliminate fossil fuel subsidies and will not let the big polluters off the hook. We will also create an independent climate accountability office to track the progress of climate change activities related to climate change. We will create 1 million jobs, green jobs, by transitioning to clean energy, energy efficient homes, electric transit, profiting homes, etc., etc. And we have a costed budget with 70 billion earmarked for this.
You've gone over your time, so you've been muted. If you want to continue, you'll have an opportunity at the end. Next, John, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you to the organizers. I'd like to also acknowledge that I'm joining you this evening from the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and the area that I'm in, that includes the Katzie, the Kwantlen, the Matsqui, and the Semiahmoo First Nations. And thank you to our organizers and our panelists for being here, as well as everybody joining us online this evening. By way of a brief introduction, I had a 34-year career with Parks Canada, the National Park Service and National Historic Sites, prior to entering politics. And in fact, one of the reasons that I got involved in politics is that in 2012, the Conservative government had a deficit reduction action plan that resulted in me, at the time being the superintendent at Pacific Rim National Park Reserve, having to lay off all of my scientists. I was very concerned about the lack of evidence-based decision-making that we would be able to be doing as we did things like endangered species recovery plans and ecosystem monitoring. And I had many discussions with my wife, and she encouraged me to do something about it. And so for me, the best way was to enter politics, and that's what I did. In the 4 years that I represented Cloverdale Langley City between 2015 and 2019, I sat on the Environment and Sustainable Development Committee for those 4 years and chaired it for the last year. We conducted many studies on how the government, how we could guide them moving from the Harper conservative time into dealing with this very real issue that's upon us. Our government has responded, unlike Rajesh in his opening comments. Our government has made significant progress. We've invested over $100 billion to date, and we have legislation now that has a pathway with 5-year increments to get us to a net zero carbon economy by 2050. I think that I'm at my time limit, and so I'll stop there, and I look forward to the conversations we'll be having over the course of the next hour, a couple of hours, and you'll hear more from me as we get into the questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you. And the People's Party of Canada.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much for hosting. It is greatly appreciated. And thank you to your father for the opening remarks. My name is Ian Kennedy, and I'm with the People's Party of Canada. Now, I know that I'm highly unlikely to win any votes here, but discussion is extremely important to me. For it is how we move forward as society is by having discussion from all sides and allow everyone to voice their opinion freely with no fear of condemnation or anything else. So this is extremely important to me, is just to be able to just to speak and to say what I personally believe in and what the PPC believes in. It is a great honor to be a part of the only party that will stand for the freedoms of the people of Canada. Politicians should be servants to the people. Instead, they are servants to big money politics. The Harper government, who, as John mentioned earlier, let go of many scientists, and Trudeau campaigned in his first election to allow all scientists to have a voice and to stop stifling debate, when in actuality it's turned out to be the exact opposite, with the difference being is that Trudeau is spending millions and millions of dollars and just putting them towards the media companies to get the better press and to present his viewpoints in a better light, which obviously I highly disagree with. I want to be able to have a true meaningful discussion, because there are still some scientists out there that are disputing this theory. And why are they being stifled? Why can't we have a true free society where they can voice their opinions? Thank you.
Alrighty, and with that, we will move on to the questions, beginning with Natalie Ross, who will also, I imagine, give a brief introduction of the Trinity Western Environmental Club.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Yeah, so I'm Natalie Ross. I'm a fourth year environmental studies student at Trinity here, and I'm also the president of TWEC, which is the Environmental Club. Our club has been a part of campus for a long time, so I'm really honored. And our club is rooted in loving God, people, and the environment. As Christians, we have been called to steward the earth. And so we want to do that with this club and spread environmental awareness, create hope for a future, and just be able to start a change here now. And with that, I'll get along to our first question. So this one's about education awareness campaigns. Across our history, we have seen movements to unite our country to defeating a common enemy. Whether it is saving meat, fats, and bones for explosives during the Second World War or addressing the COVID-19 pandemic nationally, government initiatives have been imperative to creating a united front. Climate change is our next big enemy. What would your government do to support education, outreach, and awareness campaigns regarding climate change mitigation?
So we're going to go through an A, B, C, B, C, A sort of list. So we'll start with John.
Great question. In my Parks Canada career, I had actually worked on the communication side of the program for about half of it before I went into management. And so I've been involved in looking at how we take complex issues such as biodiversity, loss of biodiversity, climate change, the impacts of it, and putting it into understandable terms. And I think that the whole idea of education and communication is absolutely essential. We do still hear parties, including the Conservatives, who can't agree that climate change is real, and I find that really concerning. As I'm out knocking on the doors, I would say that one thing that I'm hearing more so than I have in any election, this is my third, is about climate change. The summer that we've had, people understand that it's real, but there's a lot of questions about what does this mean? It seems overwhelming. And so how can we actually tackle this as society? And what's the individual role that we can have? Our party doesn't have a specific one action item on communications and education, but I would say that we have organizations, Environment Canada and Parks Canada, that have this within their mandate to help Canadians understand these very complex issues and moving to individual actions. And I think that is going to be one thing that we really need to move toward, is understanding what the solutions are, what individual actions can be taken. As an example, we have home retrofit programs that have been rolled out. And so it's about how do we let people know how to apply for those programs and the gains that can be done so that they understand why they should do that and then can actually take advantage of the government support to do that. So education and awareness is absolutely critical for that individual mobilization we're going to need. And do we get a minute and a half? I've started a timer here. I'm just, I'll stop there, I think.
I believe it's 2 minutes, but again, yeah.
Okay, well, you know what, next time I'll go for 2 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next, Ian.
Thank you, Laura. Now, of course, I support free speech and everyone spreading the word out there, as I said earlier, as that is very, very important to me. So, I mean, like through people, I always believe is the best way to spread the message. Now, I would actually love to be able to talk to you and discover all the different ways that we can treat this, our Mother Earth, much, much better than what we do. Because although I may disagree in the human caused climate change part, and more believe that it's just these natural processes, just of Earth and the sun, and just a lot of things that honestly I don't understand, because there's a lot of aspects to this. Now, with that being said, of course, we need to treat our Earth better. We need to start having better technologies to deal with all the garbage in the landfills. We need to deal with all the plastic in the ocean. We need to find real ways to get these problems right at the root of the issue, whether or not that it comes down to each of us, and just wasting as little as possible, not buying as much, because we all know that they come in all these packaging that I highly disagree with. And so, I mean, we got to really start looking at the different ways that we in each individual lives can treat this Earth better. And it starts with each of us.
And Mr. Rajesh.
Okay, regarding education communication, what does it take, like when we, of such an important issue like climate change, right? What does it take for people to gain people's trust? What we have in NDP's platform, not a communication office, but an independent climate accountability office. Independent, it's not an NDP office or a government office, which include different external, including external organization, etc. When they communicate, when the numbers come from, when the results come from that organization, an independent organization, it brings a lot of trust. I also want to address the international option. Canada's emissions are like a tiny fraction of the global, emissions actually. So it's not only improving our internal emission; it's also about working with the bigger emitters like the China and India and countries like that, because and creating a leadership role in the global scale. That's important. Now, third thing. What would be the biggest challenge when you transition from a gas or a coal-based economy to green economy? People will lose jobs, right? People will be scared that they are going to lose their job livelihood. So so for our plan, the center of that is including the workers, including the people working in this fossil fuel related industries, and taking them into account. So they are kind of the center of the platform and the dialogue. So we take them into account. Same as indigenous people. So our plan is taking it's not just an NDP platform. We are taking more external people, more external input into that, and having an independent accountability on it. Thank you. I'm looking at the clock here.
Next question will be asked by Eli Hacker, who can also give a brief introduction if you would like.
Thank you. My name is Eli Hacker. I'm a grade 12 student at Walnut Grove Secondary, and even though I'm not old enough to vote, I believe in truth, communication, and accountability, and so I'm happy to be here tonight. My question is regarding fossil fuel reduction. The International Energy Agency has called for a 50% reduction in oil production by 2040 and an immediate end to all new fossil fuel projects. Will you and your party prohibit all new fuel extraction projects and cancel the Trans Mountain Pipeline extension?
Thank you. And first, Ian.
Thank you. And I honestly love the way that you started that, the question with truth, communication, and accountability, for I do believe that all three of those are extremely vital for society to move together as one kind of thing. On this may be an unpopular opinion, but we do want to have pipelines moving, because I mean, we see the issues that Alberta has been having for the last 7-8 years kind of thing, where those people are suffering, and yet they're still just giving a lot of money away to the federal government, even though their rate of income is highly less. So we definitely want to have pipelines, because the alternative for moving oil is by train, which is an even more disastrous form of travel, or to move the oil. The other option is, like, unfortunately, we are still very much a fossil fuel based society, and we need to have a proper way to move off of fossil fuels. And honestly, I don't think that we have the answer yet, but we need to create the conditions so that Canadians can do what they do best, to innovate and to bring up some new technologies that will be truly better for all Canadians and for the world, and that we may treat this planet better. I had another part that I was going to go with that, but I forgot. So thank you.
And next, Rajesh again.
Okay, so first of all, I like the young guys are taking it. He can't even vote, but he's coming here, appreciated, and the hope is on you guys, the younger generation actually. My son is 11 years old, and a couple of years back he was using a steel straw. So anyway, your question was about the fossil fuel extraction, and NDP said clearly that we will end all fossil fuel subsidies, including the big emitters. And this is where we are different from Trudeau and Liberals. They are cutting corners for bigger polluters, but we are including them when we say we are going to stop, the fossil fuel subsidies, which of course is a part of moving into the green economy. Now coming to Trans Mountain, we were against it on the day one. We were against. We are still against. We will be continue our opposition to the Trans Mountain pipeline. Again, you can see the stark contrast in each of these bigger issues. I believe I answered the question. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
And on to John.
Great, thank you. So on the first part, our government has said, no, we're not going to cancel Trans Mountain Pipeline. And the reason is that we need to have a transition, and we believe we have to have an aggressive transition, and we have the plan to do that. But we need to diversify our energy market. Right now, primarily, the United States is the sole, or nearly the sole market, and we don't get a price premium. And so we want to actually have our energy going elsewhere internationally where we can gain a premium, which we have been committed to investing into a transition to a clean and green economy. We have had professors such as Mark Jacquard from the Simon Fraser University do a rating of the climate plans. And he's indicated that while the NDP and Green plans are more aggressive than the Liberals, it would absolutely decimate the economy, which would leave us absolutely no money to move toward a net zero economy by 2050. So our plan has been rated 8 out of 10 compared to the NDP's, which is 4 out of 10. No, it's 2 out of 10 because of those two factors. So we believe that the Trans Mountain Pipeline needs to proceed, but the emissions that come from that are within our plan to get to net zero by 2050. And so we're going to be bending the curve down on CO2 emissions, and the transmissions from the oil and gas sector are included within that. There are ways of bringing down emissions and getting us to the endpoint that we need to be at. I also want to say that we actually have a plan to end inefficient fossil fuel subsidies by 2023. And so we're in 2020, almost through 2021. We're a year away from doing that. And the NDP talk about ending all fossil fuel subsidies. Well, fossil fuel subsidies also include diesel electricity generation in remote Indigenous communities. So are the NDP saying that they would end those? We also subsidize the fossil fuel industry for capping old wells for things like methane gas escape. Methane is significantly more volatile and adds to greenhouse gases and climate change, much more so than even carbon dioxide does. And so we believe that.
All right, next up, Lauren Mckenna, who can also give an introduction of herself if she'd like to.
Hi, my name is Lauren Mckenna. I am recently allowed to vote, and so this is really important for me to learn about all this stuff, which is why I take a pretty big interest in it, and it's my first year at Trinity Western. So I am very happy to be here, and my question is, one way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is to build a green public transit system, that is, one that relies on renewable forms of energy instead of fossil fuels. What will you and your party do to create a transit system that is green, accessible, safe, efficient, and affordable?
And we'll start with Rajesh.
Excellent question. I wish I had more than 2 minutes to answer that, but I'll start off by saying that making public transit electric is one of our key promises. It's centerpiece of one of this. We also promised the federal fleet we will electrify by 2025. Affordable, the point you mentioned, our strategy is to bring it as not only affordable, but also fare free. Fare free if our target, if the local municipalities or provincial government are supportive of that, we want to work to make it. So the reason, why do we want to make the public transit so important? Because when we provide an alternative which is cheaper and electric, people will leave the cars at home and use the public transit. Okay, sorry, did I miss some portion of your question? I think it was public transit that you're talking about. Anyway, so overall, we also want to support the rail transit, use electric transit and also rail. Personally, when I came out and said that I'm running, one of my dream is actually connecting all these lower mainland cities by a rapid transit system. In '86 we had SkyTrain, right, coming up to the King George station. I haven't seen anybody like pushing for the next big wave, or even doing a great study about it. But I think at least we need studies like this. NDP is the party that is supporting transit as a key portion of their component, a green transition component. Yeah, thank you.
And back to John.
So our government believes very much that we need to have a green public transit system. And that's why just prior to the election being called, we committed to $1.3 billion in additional funding to bring SkyTrain from King George Station to Langley City within a 5-year period. And construction has already started on that line. So that's the first step in increasing public transit south of the Fraser, an area that is chronically and grossly underserved in public transit. Once we do that, we'll be able to deploy other fleets, the parts of the fleet that are running right now along the Fraser corridor as an example, into expanding it even more into our region. Our government also took federal gas tax money and returned it to TransLink that used it to actually convert a number of their diesel and gas burning vehicles into electric vehicles. There were hundreds of the fleet that were replaced through that funding that our government provided. We're also looking at providing support to individuals who don't have access to transit by having cleaner transit options. And so we've committed that by 2035, there will be no more fuel-powered vehicles for sale in Canada, and that there are subsidies and rebates available right now for electric vehicle purchases. We're also looking about greening the hydro infrastructure in Canada. The issue is that we still have provinces that burn coal to provide electricity. And so if you're going to electric vehicles but burning coal to do that, it's not really dealing with the problem. And so we have provinces like BC that actually have clean energy production. And so we want to go to a national clean grid system. So these are some of the things that we would do to help us create a transit system that is green, accessible, safe, efficient, and affordable.
And Ian.
Thank you. Now, although transit is primarily a provincial jurisdiction, I believe that Rajesh is correct in the fact that we need to look at this more and have a study to determine what the best way forward is. That being said, I do agree with John. The coal energy is one of the ones that I personally am completely against and would love to see just no coal energy anywhere. But I do digress on that. So like this, we need to be looking at this in a lot of different aspects, because the one thing that I'm a little bit hesitant on the green energy is how are we getting all these precious metals for this green energy? And the reason why I say that is because I've heard of all these pit mines that we use to mine these precious and rare earth minerals, but now all of a sudden we're scarring Earth's surface and plants aren't able to grow back. There's no more wildlife in there. And so, I mean, like exactly like I said earlier, Rajesh is right. We need to look into it more and have a study to determine the best way forward and look at absolutely every single aspect to discover what the best way to go is. Now, with that being said, again, as I said earlier, I want to make things better for small businesses, for Canadians to innovate and get even better technologies out there, because we are an incredibly smart bunch, especially with you guys. You guys are the future of our country, and I believe that one of you guys will be able to innovate and come up with a better technology.
All righty. Back to Natalie for question number 4.
This question is about carbon pricing. Canada is the only G7 country whose emissions have grown over the past decade. Many economists recommend a price on carbon as the most efficient method of reducing carbon emissions. Do you and your party support this concept, and will you increase the price on carbon in the near future?
And we'll start with John.
Yes, our government absolutely believes that a price on carbon is one of the best ways of motivating businesses and individuals to moving to reducing their carbon footprint. The provinces, some like BC, have had a price on carbon for a number of years, but others didn't. And that's why our government actually put a national price on carbon. It's called the federal backstop. And so it applies in the provinces that did not have one that met a certain test. The provinces, some of them that were affected, such as Alberta and Ontario, took us to court, and we ended up with the Supreme Court ruling that the federal government had the ability to do this because of the greater common good. And so we have now proven the authority of the federal government to do this. The plan is to, it's a starting point. We need to get the provinces now moving up incrementally. At some point, we may catch British Columbia with the federal backstop a bit. Like I say, BC has been very front leading. And as each province, if they want to go more aggressively, they can. But the federal government will be there to push along and move with the provinces to make sure that we are meeting ongoing increased prices on target on carbon, which will then help reduce the overall consumption. Just saying, yeah, we're doing that. I'll take maybe the last few seconds that I have to say that it's something that I'm also personally committed to. When I was the member of parliament, there was an organization I was involved with, the Organization for the Security and Cooperation of Europe, which had over 56 member states from Russia through to, all of the former Soviet bloc, Western Europe, and included Canada and the United States. I actually took forward a resolution in 2018 calling for all of those communities, all of those countries to put a price on carbon. And although the Russians opposed me, we managed to get it through, and each country was encouraged to do that. Thank you.
Next, Ian.
Thank you. I do not believe that the carbon tax is working, so I will have to answer with just a flat no, we will not. If the PPC was elected in government, we would not support any federal carbon tax. However, we will of course leave it to provincial governments to adopt programs to reduce these emissions if they want to, because I do believe that every province should have the right to do what you need. Now, with that being said, we do want to abolish subsidies for just all across the board as well, because it unfairly props up certain sectors and technologies that aren't as efficient or doing as well as we would like. For example, it's not as easy just to keep on raising money on fuel when we're still dependent on it. We need to allow time to bring in these better technologies and once again have the better conditions and environment to do so. And so, yeah, we are completely against a federal carbon tax with PPC.
And back to Rajesh.
All right, NDP is definitely in supportive of the carbon pricing. It is a, scientists recommended thing. We definitely support it. I believe it is $40 or something now, and it's going up every year, and we're all good with that. Now, the rest of this time I have, I will take this opportunity to bring you guys, young guys' attention some of the local issues that is happening in this whole carbon economy, and I want to give you specific examples. Loblaws is one of the richest corporation. They made 220 million in profits. That's not my problem. Trudeau government gave 12 million to fix their refrigeration. So the responsibility of acting for climate or climate change is coming to the taxpayers, which may be okay. That's not my point. My point is a similar situation is happening right here in Vancouver. Vancouver Port has around 1,200 truckers. They are asked to change their trucks, older trucks, which are 10 years or older, right away. So starting 2012, they have to change their old trucks because of climate change. Now, what are these? These are owner-operated trucks. What are they supposed to do? They get $0. They have no support. These are the injustices happening that the ordinary people are shouldering the issues related to climate change. And there is no big media reporting this. These are, so yeah, we are in support of climate change and things like that, but we need to take these local, smaller issues into the regular people should not be shouldering all the responsibilities, all the issues of climate change, while the bigger corporation taking away this taxpayer money. I will leave it there. Please do some research on these kind of things. Thank you.
All right. Next question is on to Eli.
My question is regarding forest emissions. Canada's forests are the best agent to capture and sequester carbon dioxide. However, they have deteriorated, to the point where in a net CO2 budget, they no longer absorb carbon dioxide, but instead emit it. The federal government does not track the rising carbon emissions caused by destructive forestry practices and increasing wildfires. How will you and your party ensure that Canada's forest emissions are tracked and that forests regain their capacity to sequester significant amounts of CO2?
All right, on to Ian.
Thank you, and thank you. Oh, sorry.
Am I getting? I feel confuzzled. Am I getting the order right? I believe, or is it John first? Okay, we can start with Ian, and we'll just continue from that order.
I apologize, John. Totally my fault. So first things first is this is again primarily a provincial jurisdiction, and the BC government, historically speaking, albeit there's been some issues lately, has been pretty good with. No, I take that back. Historically speaking, we've been okay with making sure that trees are replanted after every bit is logged. Now the Fairy Creek is a whole nother story. But I believe that we need we need better forest management. We need to be clearing up the brush underneath these trees to help reduce the forest fires. And if we have better forest management, obviously it'll make things, make forest fires easier to control and all that. The other thing is I want to see more trees in city areas. I was talking to an Indigenous lady the other day, and she was like, yeah, you know what? Like, especially with the way that things are changing right now, we need more trees in city spaces to help with the heat and keep things cool for everyone in that city, especially as the temperatures are rising, unfortunately. And so trees are very, very important, especially here in British Columbia, where we have among the most beautiful province and area in the world, in my opinion. And of course, we need to keep it that way. We need to keep all the trees planted in the ground. And when we are logging, we need to make sure we're doing sustainably and making sure that we're planting more trees. So that way we keep it as beautiful as how we found it when Europeans first moved in, or yeah. Thank you.
Next, John. Or no, Rajesh, my apologies.
All right. Okay, hope you can hear me. This is something falling a bit out of my expertise, but I will just refer to the commitment documents we have. We will do focused investment in forest management. It will help reduce forest fire risk and will take steps to encourage innovation in forestry, including value-added wood production, reforestation, etc. We are committed to pursuing a nature agenda anchored by our commitment to safeguarding ecosystem and biodiversity by protecting 30% of our land, freshwater, and oceans by 2030. We will expand our urban national parks and restore urban diversity and ensure the species at risk act is enforced. We will launch a 10-year nature plan to reverse the species loss, and we would curb the import and domestic trade of wild animals. We will further protect our oceans by reducing emissions, fishing, expanding marinated areas, etc. I believe that to some extent answered your question. Thank you.
And John.
This is one that's near and dear to me. When I was chair of the Environment and Sustainable Development Committee in my last year as member of Parliament, we did a number of studies on how we could look at forests, wetlands, and agricultural lands and helping sequester carbon. And there are many things that our government has took from our study and is doing. One of them is we've committed to planting 2 billion trees over the next 10 years. And that includes urban forestation and reforestation. We're looking at we've committed to adding 10 new national parks and marine conservation areas to Canada's protected spaces as a way of helping increase natural areas, and as well as restoring the natural processes that help sequester carbon. We have committed to BC, specifically $50 million to help secure old growth forests that are vulnerable and that are huge repositories for carbon. We also are really committed to working with those with lived knowledge on how to do this, and a really obvious partner are our Indigenous peoples, the Indigenous peoples in Canada who have been here since the beginning of time. These communities know how the ecosystems generally worked and how to keep them healthy. And so we have an extensive urban conservation strategy, or not urban, Indigenous-led conservation strategy for Indigenous lands. We have a Indigenous Guardians program, sort of a watch program for natural areas. And so I think these are all really good examples of how our government is already doing this. We, and I'll say in 2018, committed $1.3 billion to this kind of conservation. And then in 2020, another $3.3 billion. Our government has spent more on this kind of encouraging sequestration of carbon than any other government in the history of our country. Thank you.
And Ian.
Oh, I screwed it up earlier. I went first.
No worries, but now it's your turn.
Cool. So as I said, this is still the forest emissions question, correct?
Yes.
Cool. So you want me to have another go at it?
Oh, am I? Oh my
You
goodness.
answered it already.
You already went? So we're on to our sixth question then? Okay,
Yes,
my apologies.
No, that's
Lauren.
my fault for screwing everything up by going first. So that my apologies to you.
No worries, no worries. Lauren, if you'd like to go with our sixth question.
Okay, so if elected to represent Cloverdale and Langley City constituents, what do you view as the most important local climate emergency issues to be taken forward to the federal government?
And we'll start with Rajesh.
Yeah, something that what does Cloverdale lacks centrally? Connectivity. Cloverdale, city center of Cloverdale is the only place where there is no direct link to the SkyTrain station over here. Or if you look at all the other city centers, we have it already. So a direct bus to that, or overall buses, or more buses, more connectivity is something Cloverdale, especially that city center area, is lacking. And also from a climatic angle, what is the most immediate thing we can do is, again, public transit, and heavy investment in public transit, also electrification of it. So that will be something dear and dear to my heart. If you look at my Facebook page, etc., you can see that 2 years back I started an organization called PTAN, Private Public Transit Advocacy Network, that is advocating for more and more public transit investments here. So that's one, definitely the most important thing, and which can make an immediate impact. And of course, there are a few other problems in this: homelessness, mental health. These are all kind of one way or the other related to power, related to these things. I also want to say that NDP has in our plan a guaranteed livable income. In other places, there is things like UBI, Universal Basic Income. I am from a technology background. I believe Universal Basic Income, or a guaranteed livable income, is a very, very important social concept going to be, especially when things like automation, robotics come in full gear. There's going to be lesser and lesser jobs. There is going to be more very high-paying jobs. But anyway, these are all social constructs dear to my heart. Of course, as I said, a larger expansion, a high-speed connectivity to other cities through their rapid transit is, of course, something dear to me. Thank you. I think I'm touching a time limit.
And John.
I think that there are a couple of things that we need to do from a local area to take to Ottawa. And this is looking at issues of climate adaptation and climate resiliency. As I sit here in my house this evening with the rain driving down against my windows, I think that we're going to see more intense flood events. There was also talk today about after the drought we had, that the soils are not ready to receive these kind of heavy rains that we're seeing. And so we're not prepared for these types of extreme climate events that we're going to be seeing. We get winds, this softening of the soils because of the rain and followed by the droughts that we've had. And we could have huge blowdowns as an example in our communities. It was an absolute tragedy what we saw recently in New York City, where people drowned in their basements because of the heavy storm waters that came and the whole infrastructure was not prepared to shed that water to handle it. And I think that here in our communities that are growing, we need to understand the increased frequency and severity of these types of weather systems that we're going to be experiencing, and to help build the infrastructure. There are natural infrastructures, having more wetlands and detention ponds that can help gather some of this instead of it all going into the stormwater runoff systems that can be overwhelmed. We need to look in Cloverdale, Langley City at our dike systems as our oceans rise. The dikes that we have could actually, if they're not dealt with properly, could break down, and that would see ocean waters coming into productive agricultural lands, which would be devastating for food security. We need to look at preparing for all of this through things like mapping. When I was in office, I was able to secure funds for the township of Langley to actually look at where water will go when we have these high rain events. Langley City has the Nickel floodplain. And so we need to understand with more intense moisture coming in there, what businesses, what buildings, what homes are susceptible to flooding, and how can we deal with that? So those would be some of the immediate issues I would take to Ottawa for our local community.
And finally, Ian.
Thank you, Laura. Now, honestly, the biggest thing for me, and it's, as I mentioned earlier, I would love to see more trees in city spaces. I do believe that trees will help soak up the water a lot better that when we have this lovely Vancouver weather days, and it also provides shade, and it helps just for better air. It helps trap all the crap in the air from the emissions from vehicles and whatnot. And so, I mean, more trees and having a true discussion, especially with the Indigenous, I believe, as John said earlier, I do agree with it, a local discussion with the Indigenous and anyone that feels like they have something to add to the conversation, and see what the best ways and things that we can implement are. As Rajesh said, that went off topic, but I totally agree with. Homelessness and mental health are among my priorities, and one of my biggest issues with, especially in Langley, within our riding kind of thing. And those are problems that I want to do my best to really nip in the bud, so we can have a meaningful solution instead of just throwing more money at the situation, as we have historically done, and it is unfortunately not working. But the other thing is we're spending billions and billions of dollars for these green technologies and subsidies and whatnot, and yet it's going to be our children that suffer with all of this debt. We're even starting to suffer right now with the inflation that's continuing to rise because of the amount of money that we are borrowing from the Bank of Canada. And so, I mean, I want to make things cheaper for all Canadians right across the board. I want to balance the budget within 2 years and then cut taxes for all Canadians bit by bit to make things more fair, and so that people can start to put money towards the things that they believe in. And I think that's the best way to move forward.
Okay, we'll start, and if he can rejoin, he will, and we can give him the time to answer. So we're going to begin our audience questions, and we're going to begin with Natalie Ross once again.
Hello, sorry, the power went out, so my camera is off now because it is dark. But I will start the first question. What ecological job opportunities will you make available to our workforce, especially in our youth and post-secondary students?
And we'll start with John.
We have a really good platform on the transition from the current economy that we have to a green economy. And this means, there's going to be jobs in research. There's going to be jobs in understanding the kind of technology that we need. And I think that youth are going to be absolutely critical to that through universities, through research programs, through co-op programs with employers. I think that, jobs with the National Park Service, the career that I had, are very realistic. We have Canada Summer Jobs and Young Canada Works are programs that actually help youth get into the environmental field. And when I was a member of Parliament, we had applications from groups such as SNAP, the Surrey Naturalists. It was a restoration program in Surrey to help youth get hands-on ecosystem restoration experience. And so I think it really is unlimited, the work that government can do with partner organizations, such as the hosts of this evening's event, as well as through government channels itself, to really help position our youth for a clean economy and having a significant role in it. I would also say that on helping people with school, and this is a bit of a tangent, but I think it's relevant. We have said that we will make student loans for the federal portion of student loans tax-free. And currently people have to start paying it back at $35,000 of income, and we will raise that to $50,000 of it being tax-free and not requiring repayment, so that people can actually get established in their careers, such as in this climate field. And then when their income gets to that level, they can save up some money and for perhaps a down payment on a house, and so at a $50,000 income level, then they can start paying back the student loans. And that, I think, will help us in the transition to a green and clean economy.
Ian.
Thank you. So number one thing that I want to do is adjust the small business bill, so that way there's all these little loopholes and whatnot. Sorry, not small business bill, but business bills in general. Take away all these loopholes that allow the rich companies that can pay for these lawyers to lawyer up and save millions in these tax loopholes. So we want to abolish that and make it a nice even playing field for all businesses. And then once we balance the budget in 2 years, we will decrease the business tax from 15% to 10%. And what this does is it allows the private players to develop the profitable and efficient alternatives that we desperately need. So that way we can foster that better environment for Canadians and for young people yourselves to develop these alternatives that are very, very much needed, kind of thing. The other thing that I should have mentioned earlier, so I'm going to digress a little bit, is that we do obviously need to invest in adaptation strategies for problems do arise from the result of any natural climate change. And so I would love for all students to be a part of that, because I believe that the students have the best ideas out there. Students, young adults have the best ideas out there. And I want to make these ideas easier just to get out in the public and to allow you guys to do what you do best. Thank you.
And Rajesh.
NDP has one of the key components of NDP's student plan is the student loan forgiveness of $20,000. And all these are remember, I want to remind that NDP has a costed platform, so we are not passing it on to our children or anything. We have a costed platform, as I said, looked at by the Parliamentary Budget Office. It includes 166 billion in new revenue in the next 5 years and 214 billion in expenses, which is now 10 billion a year in deficit, which is very close to what we have now. What NDP has mainly is the new revenue of 166 billion. So we have money for everything we are talking about. Now, coming to the question, ecological job opportunity, I cannot comment on very specific job opportunities. It's very small focused question, but I will answer it this way. Ecology, climate change, the kind of related things jobs are going to be on the rise. And of course, my area, robotics, computers, this is of course our area. But I will encourage all the young generation to look at things more holistically. Not just your job. These are you're all educated young guys, so you should be okay. But support things like universal basic income, or as in NDP's platform, forget the term, but basically a guaranteed livable income. This is what ensures like the advancement in technology, anything that as we humanity make is available to everyone. Tomorrow, if something happens to you, there is still a livable income that you're getting. So you're not starving, you're not homeless. So this is the direction NDP is taking forward. And to materialize it, we have a costed plan by PBO. We are, we have the numbers out there. Feel free to go look at it. Thanks.
Eli, with our next audience question.
At which number is the climate crisis on your platform's priority list? And then please provide an explanation.
And we'll start with Ian.
Thank you for the question. To be honest, like it's not too high up on our platform, as we do find that we're in a financial crisis in Canada with inflation spiraling starting to look like it's going to spiral out of control. And so for us, the number one goal is to balance the budget, which can still be done in 2 years. And like, I want to, again, make things better for all of you to innovate and to come up with these better technologies. And I think that's what the government should be doing personally. I'm all for small government, less bureaucracy, and to make things better for all Canadians across the board. And so and that's how I view that we should move the government forward.
Rajesh.
It's not only climate change is priority one. And not only this, because it's a climate change thing, you can go and look at every interview of mine, which is available on my Facebook page. I said that in every interview I had so far, and it will continue to be the priority one. And the reason why do we think it is, if you do not address climate change, all the other advancement we do, all other things we do, is are going to go for a toss, right? Not just because things like wildfires, we have money those there, and it's not only from an economical aspect. The planet is in peril. We are at code red, as IPCC is saying, and they are not making it up. These are climate scientists from across the world are talking about it. So there is absolutely no question this is priority one. Thank you.
And John.
When I ran for office the first time in 2015, a key part of our platform was that the economy and the environment have to go hand in hand. And we've maintained that position in the 2019 campaign and again in this one. We don't have a numbered sequence for our platform, but our platform is built on 6 fundamental sort of pillars, and this is one of them. So we feel it is important enough to Canadians that we have a global issue. If we don't deal with it, we could be threatening the future of our planet and our civilization, and that's very concerning, and it should be very concerning for all of us. And so it is an important part of our plan, but so is COVID recovery. We need to get through this pandemic. We need to help people recover. We need to save lives that are being needlessly lost from the COVID virus. We want to deal with issues of housing and affordability, which we hear a lot about as we do with things like climate. We want to provide an equal place, an equal space for all Canadians. And we need to continue working on reconciliation with Indigenous, with the original inhabitants, the Indigenous peoples of Canada. And so, it's not one above the other, but for us, this is the sort of mountain that we're moving forward on behalf of Canadians and for our future, so that we can make sure that these very large items are being dealt with. I would say, looks like I have a second left, that, we were not going to get through all of the pieces of our platform in the discussion this evening. It's extensive, and I would encourage people to look at it. It's on liberal.ca or on my website, johnaldig.ca. And there are many aspects. Ian had talked about some precious minerals for battery production. And so we have a piece specifically on that. It's just, there's so many different pieces. I think it's a wonderful plan, and I'm really proud to be part of the team that is putting this forward in this election.
I will pass it to Lauren for our final audience question.
Okay, so the question is, are you aware of the biggest climate issues our constituency is most responsible for, contributing to, or able to address? If not, why not?
And we will start with Rajesh.
Sorry, I couldn't hear the question. Can you just say that again?
Yeah, I can say it again. So it is, are you aware of the biggest climate issues our constituency is most responsible for, contributing to, or able to address? If not, why not?
Oh, okay. The local, okay. It's a tricky question. But I will start with transportation. But I already talked about transportation is a generic issue. But at the local level, we have some industries here, especially on the Langley side of things. It will be part of a national platform. It is, it's not a local issue that we will go in the address. But what I want to encourage, I want to promote is, there is a student in UBC. Actually, he came up with a local, I forgot the name actually. They came up with a strategy with the UBC professor about how at a block level or a home level we can improve the greenery, how we can create food there, those kind of things. I want to have something like that in Surrey and Langley. I will encourage everyone to look at that kind of local, block level, home level, having green walls, and at least a few fruit trees. Planting fruit trees is an important aspect. Though, see, climate change not only government responsibility. It is something we each and everybody has to contribute. Otherwise, I don't know if it's going to work. And these kind of local action, I think it's becoming a very important question actually now, that we all have to pitch in, right? It's not only somebody's responsibility; it is our responsibility, our collective responsibility as a human species, or a species. We are actually responsible for the other species also. We are the most intelligent species form here. And what about the other species? We have a responsibility towards. Thank you.
Next, John.
When I heard the question, the first thing that came to mind was this idea of thinking globally, acting locally. And so it's like, what are those things that we can do? We know that transportation is, a key part of the problem that we have. We need to get people out of their vehicles. We need to have cleaner and more efficient ways of moving people around our community. And so our government is committed to things like we talked earlier on clean and green transit, getting people out of their cars or moving them into electric vehicles. We also need to have jobs closer to home, good jobs, so that we're not having to commute out of the suburbs into downtown Vancouver. And I think that we have a huge opportunity in the move to a clean environment, a clean economy. Mark Carney, a former Bank of Canada and Bank of England governor, has estimated that the transition is going to be worth in the trillions of dollars. And if we can use Canadian talent and know-how, including our youth and our students, to develop the knowledge and the technology and the solutions to deal with climate change, we can export that internationally to the developing world, to the developed world. That's going to be good for local businesses. It's going to be good for our planet, quite frankly. I think that our homes, we know that to meet the 2050 targets, a lot of the buildings that stand today are going to still be there and counting against those targets. And so how do we do energy retrofits? How do we create a circular economy? And so we've actually said that we would mandate a ability to repair kind of bill, so that you know, a lot of our electronics, a lot of our appliances are like short-term use, and then they go to the landfill. We want to change that. We want to ban single-use plastics. We want to have a circular economy so that our recycling rates are significantly increased. And you know, so it's this multifaceted approach to climate change with very local actions that we need to do.
And lastly, Ian.
Thank you again, Laura. Now, I have said this a few times already, so I'll just briefly touch upon it. And as John said as well, we do need to foster better conditions to have more technologies come out, because I'm not convinced that we have the answer just for any of the technologies that we currently have across the board, because there's issues, in my opinion, to each and every one. Now, as Rajesh said, and I really like what he said in this, and this is why I'm always open to have discussions about things, fruit trees and just having more trees in locally, and I could always talk to the municipal and provincial governments to make this happen, but having fruit trees, I believe it is Sweden or Denmark or one of the Nordic countries where they have the right to go into the forest and pick the berries, mushrooms, and things that are locally grown. I think this is a tremendous idea. I would love to see this implemented more on a local scale, because for a lot of reasons, it cuts down on the travel to get other food in. It's free, so it's even better for us as well, and it encourages us to go out into the forest and just to enjoy time in nature, which is extremely important to me. So like having something like that is a tremendous idea. And the biggest thing to me is just having the discussion. There's lots I can learn from other people, and we can discover ways to make things better for each other and for our community. Because we definitely need to make this community stronger. We need to be able to have things so that it's easier for everyone to get things like nice and closer, which is massively difficult to do, but it's something that I believe that we can find a way to work towards. And I'd love to be able to help out with that. Thanks for the question.
Alrighty, that concludes the question portion of this meeting. Lastly, each candidate will get a chance to give a closing statement, and we will begin with Rajesh.
All right. Well, both liberals and conservative have been in power. None of them want to talk about the results. They want to talk about new plans, but don't want to talk about the plans they told us last time. Liberals have been went to the extent of dressing up a long-time oil and gas advocator's SFU professor who had a degree in resource management and master's in economy as a climate guy and get a ranking for their platform. And this is a guy who is continuing to support the use of oil and gas, and also even wrote a book about it 15 years back. And we are proud that he does not like NDP's plan, and NDP's plan is what he is hating the most. And we are proud of that. Now, NDP will create 1 million green jobs and kickstart our economy and COVID recovery while not raising the taxes on average Canadians or businesses. We are generating new revenue through wealth tax and corporate tax and closing tax loopholes and things like that. At the end of the day, liberals and conservatives want to give the impression that they are the only game in town, and both does the same thing. Conservative does it openly, while the liberals does it deceptively. NDP has a track record of keeping promises, at least BC, like the liberals, unlike liberals and conservatives. We removed the tolls. We brought in a hospital here. We are talking about Patola Bridge, etc. So let's vote for a government that will fight for our future. Support Jagmeet Singh, vote for Rajesh Jayaprakash in Cloverdale, Langley City. Thank you.
Next, John.
Well, let me put it out there that in Cloverdale, Langley City, it had traditionally, although it's a new riding, the component parts had always been conservative, and I was the first Liberal to win that riding in 2015. I worked really hard on a number of environmental issues, which were important to both myself and to the constituents I represented. In 2019, I lost to a conservative who is a climate change denier, a self-reported and proud climate change denier. She's on record as saying that we could pump more than 100 times of current CO2 levels into the atmosphere and plants would do better. I think that it is a very dangerous way of thinking, and it isn't supported by the evidence that we see. Climate change is real. The Conservative Party at their convention couldn't even support a resolution on calling climate change or acknowledging that climate change is real. So that's very concerning. The Liberal Party has a plan. It has been looked at by Mark Jacquard, as I mentioned previously. And I find it concerning that the NDP continue to attack the independent academics, non-partisan academics, for the research they've done in rating our plan an 8 out of 10 and the NDP plan a 2 out of 10. That's the independent analysis, because we can get there in a realistic way to net zero carbon economy by 2050 without destroying the economy. We also have Andrew Weaver, the former BC Green Party a leader in British Columbia, who has endorsed the Liberal plan as the one that will get us to where we need to be by 2050. And at the beginning of the meeting, Rajesh held up a Cloverdale Reporter that has my advertisement on it, that includes a shout out of support from Elizabeth May for the work that I did while in Parliament. And so to me, I have strong credentials. Our party has a plan to do the work that needs to be done. We have done a lot of work over the last 6 years, but there's more work to be done, and we will get us there. And so on September 20th, I ask everyone to vote John Alday. Thank you.
And lastly, Ian.
Thank you once again. Now, most parties make election promises, but do not keep them. As you probably can tell, I am not one to make promises here that I cannot keep. And I am going to do my best to definitely make this world a better place for all this, for all of us to live in, including the animals and of forest, and making sure we treat Mother Earth better, because that is, of course, extremely important to me. This is the only planet we have. We do need to treat it better, but we might highly disagree on the best ways to do that. But we all do care about this earth, and we all do want to make this place a better place, at least for the most part. Housing and COVID are primarily among my concerns in this election. I do want to end the COVID restrictions. For housing, I really like that point on our platform as well, especially after talking to someone in the middle of Langley City who was complaining about this apartment block that was made with a bunch of 1-bedroom plus den apartments that's only half full. Now, with housing prices the way they are, they're still making a ton of money off it, which is a huge issue. So this is something that needs to be fixed, because we're not efficiently using what's in front of us and what we are building. And for us to be truly environmentalists, in my opinion, we need to be careful about every single decision that we make and make sure that we maximize the efficiency of everything that we do. Period. End of statement. Now, the People's Party of Canada, we stand for freedom, respect, fairness, and personal responsibility. These are words that I would love to bring to Ottawa, and I want those words just across the board, whether or not it's how we are dealing with the climate change that we currently have, or even just day-to-day interactions with each other. I want to thank you for your time, and please, if you want, just look at our platform and make a decision for yourselves. I'm no politician, just an everyday guy, and I want you to vote with your hearts.
Thank you. Well, that concludes our meeting, and I want to give a big thank you to each of the candidates for their time and for showing up. I want to thank my lovely panelists for all their help, and my team for all of my help. I want to encourage everybody to get out and vote before the election on Monday, and to each in our own lives do everything that we can to take care of and to be good stewards to the planet, because we only get one. There is no planet B. So thank you all, and have a lovely night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.